So this video is based on international trade, and it's looking at why there might be an argument for protectionism and why there might be an argument for the need for tariffs. So the concept is going to be based on dumping, and what I mean by dumping is it's a term which is used when a country or a company is able to produce a good at a very, very low cost. And this could be because of specialization, it could be because of government intervention, it could be because of just simply how low their cost of productions are within that country, maybe because of how little regulation there might be. But for whatever the reason, they're able to produce at a very, very low cost, and therefore they can export it around the world at a very, very cheap price. And that price is lower than sometimes the cost of those countries' producers. Is lower than their ability to actually produce at that price. So in other words, the context of this video, we're going to be looking at China and steel. And China, they're able to produce steel at such a low cost that they can sell it in countries like America for a price which is lower than the actual cost of production of steel within America. So American producers would be accusing China of dumping steel on their markets. Now, I've mentioned America, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a quick video which was actually created by an organization that looks after the interests of manufacturers in the US, and they're specifically trying to protect, within this information, protect their steel manufacturers, and they're accusing China of dumping. So how China are able to do this is because a lot of their steel producers are actually owned by the state, and there's been a lot of state aid, so for example subsidies, and those subsidies have helped to lower the cost of production, and because of that they can then pass that lower cost on to these international markets. So I'll just show you the video now. Okay, so it's not just America that are accusing China of doing this. Clearly, we can see the impact it's having on America, and that's why we had the likes of Donald Trump, who's, since he's been in power, he's definitely had an anti-globalization message, and he's obviously had and I suppose taken on China in the kind of trade war, with tariffs being implemented on many Chinese goods which are commonly imported. Now, like I said before, it's not just America. We can see with the articles on this screen, there's Australia, there's the EU, including the UK, there's even Latin America and South American countries, and all of them have accused China of this unfair, I suppose, uncompetitive type of action with regards to dumping. Now, I mentioned the EU. The EU have really tried to tackle China, and especially in terms of Germany. Germany have seen real problems with their steel manufacturing because of the cheap competition from China. And I'm just going to show you another video. And within this video, it's really interesting to look at how The German suppliers they're willing to try and produce it at the price which China are selling at, but they're physically not able to. And therefore, you could argue that they are making subnormal profits. And in the long run, they just will not be able to exist. And it'll end up in the shutdown of these German manufacturing firms, which again, that straight away causes a structural unemployment, because those workers, those employees who may have been working in steel manufacturing all their lives, now the steel industry is pretty much made redundant because of the competition from China. So I'll just show you the video now.
Daniel Gast only started work at steelmaker Salzgitter in northern Germany 1 year ago. He's in charge of quality control. But he's already wondering if his job is safe. In recent years, the steelworks has barely been turning a profit, even though it's operating at full capacity. Competition from China is pushing down prices.
Right now, China is flooding the market with cheap steel. We wouldn't be able to produce a single slab at those prices.
These coils of steel will be turned into cars or washing machines. But the same bought from Chinese companies cost 40% less than they do at Salzgitter. The German company also feels disadvantaged because, unlike its Asian competitors, it has to abide by costly environmental standards. Almost all the steelworkers are unionized. The Works Council is calling for better protection of the EU market against steel imports from China.
If your prices are cheap, you'll sell your goods on the market. That's what has to be stopped. It's what my colleagues are afraid of. Understandably, they fear our company might have to close down. That's what we're all talking about.
The steelworkers don't want to end up victims of globalization. From the factory floor to the executive floor, the company is determined to halt imports of cheap steel.
We manufacture for, let's say, €500, and they sell it for 300. A business can't withstand that in the long run. So it makes sense for the EU to regulate it.
Salzgitter is a commercial company listed on the stock exchange, out to make a profit, operating on the free market. The volume of steel produced and its price are determined by supply and demand. Salzgitter management argues that China is not a free market. Its economy is planned, and the country produces too much steel.
There is overcapacity of about 400 million tons in the steel industry. That's double the amount we produce in Europe. This excess is exported to world markets. China is exporting its structural problems, which result from processes that are not driven by market forces.
Germany once had a powerful and successful steel industry. It has long been in decline. It now accounts for just 2 to 3% of GDP. The industry wants to see tariffs on Chinese steel for 6 months. But economists warn that China might respond by imposing tariffs on imports of German machine parts. Stefan Thompson says open markets are better.
Of course, this smacks of protectionism, but you have to see it in context. Any compensatory measures or tariffs should only be temporary, at least at first. I think negotiations would be the way to go. The Chinese steel industry and government know there is overcapacity and know they need to restructure the steel industry.
But in Salzgitter, Daniel Gast and his colleagues are losing patience. Cutbacks in production and staff are now the norm. 1,500 workers have already lost their jobs. The mood at the company is pretty grim. Staff wonder if Salzgitter can ride out the flood of cheap steel from Asia.
It is alarming for me personally. I'm relatively young and highly skilled, so I'm not in the most immediate danger. But for others at the company, especially older colleagues who've been here for a long time, the situation is much more precarious.
Whatever the advantages of competition on the marketplace, many steelworkers here see globalization as jeopardizing their jobs. They're not going to give them up without a fight.
About China Steel, and we're thinking about their ability to produce at such low costs. We can obviously consider the supply and demand curve. And what's interesting about international trade, even though it's macroeconomics, you can start to introduce micro diagrams. And when we're thinking about specific products such as steel, we can do just a micro style supply and demand diagram, and we can do a supply shift to the right because the supply shift is supply with a subsidy. And as we can see there, it reduces the price. Now, China, they do not need the amount of steel that is being produced. So obviously all the excess steel is just going to be passed on to the foreign market. And when that happens, we've got this situation where, let's imagine this was the current market equilibrium in, let's say, Germany or America for steel, and all of a sudden, because of the excess steel that has been dumped onto their country's market, we've got China's price. And within China's price, we can see that actually, based on Q1, there is now a contraction of supply because suppliers are not either A, willing, or B, able to produce at that price. So that straight away means that there's going to be a loss of producer surplus. Furthermore, I mean, there will be benefits for consumers because actually consumers, there's an extension of demand now in terms of what I mean by that is consumer surplus increases because they're able now to demand it at Q2, which is obviously greater quantity compared to Q star or Q asterisk. Now, so when we're looking at dumping, we can obviously look at it from the point of view of these low prices are good for German firms that require steel as a key commodity. But the whole idea of dumping is we're looking at it from the perspective of German steel producers, and the German government or the European Union are not happy about this dumping because they cannot compete, and they're worried about the likes of structural unemployment. So what they will probably have to do, and I did mention within the video, they might have to I suppose put tariffs on and put tariffs on steel to bring up that price, so then therefore they're increasing the domestic producer surplus, so German producers now can produce and they're able and they're willing to produce at a higher price. Now the issue with that is how maybe China retaliate. I mean, I think from the video, from what we've just seen, it seems like they're trying to do it for 6 months to get them to the negotiation table so then they can try to negotiate, and the WTO and the World Trade Organization will also help with that. So when we talk about the WTO, with this scenario, and again, it was back in 2015, China actually, the WTO did intervene and China did lose the dispute with the WTO, and the WTO did accuse China of dumping and told them to stop it. And obviously, if you're a member of the WTO, and there's a lot of benefits of being a member of the WTO, you pretty much need to follow their advice and their suggestions. So it has limited perhaps a little bit of the dumping that has previously taken place, but you can still accuse China of doing it, still with steel and with other commodities and products as well.